Mhm.
All right, so I have Miss Linda Prather here, and she is with La Leche League, and she's going to give us some information about breastfeeding and all the fun things associated with that. So take it away. I'm so excited to learn more about this. This is the first I've heard about this program, and it's international, right? It's
Yes,
all over.
yes. It
So,
actually began back in the early to mid 50s when it had a few little ladies sitting around at a picnic and they were nursing their babies. And all of a sudden, you had other women coming up and they were asking questions and looking to see what was going on. And they were sharing their experiences about not being able to nurse sometimes, or maybe where the doctor suggested formula. And so the ladies thought, well, let's get together and have a meeting and we'll answer everybody's questions. And that's all that will take. We'll just have one meeting and we'll be good. So they had a meeting and they had a lot of questions. And then they had more meetings and more meetings. And then they decided that they were going to have to start splitting up because they had so many people coming to the meetings. Because back in the day, it was about formula feeding and twilight births, and nobody really knew as much about nursing. So these ladies did their best to answer questions, and it became more and more that more people had questions, and all of a sudden it got bigger and bigger. And eventually now it's become an international organization all over the world where they have mother to mother support meetings, usually once a month. It tends to be a series of meetings, and they'll go over those. It's a repeating series and you can come with questions anytime about anything having to do with nursing primarily. But there's also other questions that get answered. So it's pretty nice. This book is really, really great. If you can see it, The Womanly Art of Breastfeeding. Typically, all meetings will have this in a lending library, so you can check it out. Uh, there's another one really helpful too, Sweet Sleep, because I know that sometimes can be a really stressful time when you're trying to get your baby down and you're like, what do I do? And then we're led to believe a lot of different things that sometimes aren't actually true. So, yeah, some of the meetings that they have, it's the advantages of breastfeeding for mom and baby. There's also the family and the breastfed baby, the art of breastfeeding and overcoming difficulties. Sometimes just switching positions can actually help with that. And then nutrition and weaning, it is a conversation that we talk about because once you start introducing anything besides nursing milk, breast milk, then you're technically slowly beginning to wean. So sometimes you don't really need to do that right away. You want to make sure that your baby can have at least the signs of being able to sit up, has like a tongue reflex to be able to push stuff out if it doesn't want to be there. You need to at least have those things. So a lot of times that doesn't happen until 6 months, sometimes maybe longer, but definitely paying attention. When you start weaning, obviously it doesn't mean you have to completely stop nursing because it's very complementary to what you're also feeding. And it's nice because it's not only about nursing, it's sometimes just the connection or the comfort that's really awesome. Um, and it tends to often fix boo-boos. So when the baby gets a boo-boo, if you nurse,
hmm.
usually baby is much happier. It solves many problems. Not all, but many, definitely. We just started a meeting here in Anaconda at the Revive Church. It's going to be the third Wednesday every month from 10:30 to 11:30. So if you're available, if you're in town, I want to offer it to lease places around Anaconda, Butte, Deer Lodge, anywhere else that people might want to come
Mhm.
check it out.
And so, for people who are not in this area, you said it's international. What would be the
Mhm.
best way to figure out where their local meetings are or different things like that?
You can go to it's the Leche League International, so LLLI.org. And there's a search thing in there that you can look for meetings. and just put in your zip code and find out where some meetings are that may be close to your home. Some people, some leaders will do Zoom meetings. I know that was really prevalent back when other things were happening. Um, being able to go to a meeting though is really nice, just to be able to have that in-person mother to mother support. And it sometimes helps just to be able to look at how the positioning is, maybe what the latch looks like, identifying if there's any tongue or lip ties, um, and just having other women to be able to speak with. I like to think of it as kind of like a potluck. So, a lot of information and ideas come up. Some work for you, some might not work for you. So take what you want and leave the stuff that doesn't work.
Yeah.
Definitely. But yeah, look on La Leche League Incorporated. Sorry, La Leche League. It's LLI.org. And you can find meetings in your area.
And so you mentioned about the weaning, which I think is interesting. It's a conversation that actually came up at a conference I was at a few weeks ago about the art of weaning and how, to not feel judged and to just do whatever is best for you and your baby.
Mhm.
And, there's not a lot of talk about that emotional aspect of weaning and
It can be very emotional.
very, very emotional. And that was just something I was like, wow, I'd never really thought about that. And, you know, making that decision for yourself and for the baby. And really that's the only people who should have a say in that. Like,
Agree.
and it's like it's that relationship that, that time in the life where people don't really think about that it is a transition. And through occupational therapy, that's what one of the OTs is talking about, that she was working with moms on learning about how to wean, and I just found that really interesting because that's that is, it can be very emotional time. So do you have experience with that or talking with women about that?
Well, it's kind of interesting because even like the World Health Organization, they suggest nursing up until 2 years and beyond if it's something that both mom and baby would like to do. Now, mind you, as your child gets older, breastfeeding looks a lot different than the newborn stage because that's very different. But sometimes it's just here and there. Um, a lot of times it just happens normally. Sometimes the child gets busy, the mom gets busy. Sometimes you have to go back to work. The environment changes. It's really great opportunity though to still reconnect with your baby. And I don't know, it's just something again that you have to be comfortable with, and don't let anybody else tell you when you're supposed to stop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Um, as far as other meetings that you've gone to and hosted and run, like what are some common themes that you guys talk about, or a lot of questions that a lot of moms typically have?
There's a lot of questions often about cluster feeding because nobody ever warns you about cluster feeding. That can happen. That's actually happens a lot in the very beginning because you're trying to build your milk supply. And if you realize actually, which a lot of people don't, the newborn's tummy is like really tiny and it starts getting bigger over the next several days. And as the stomach gets bigger, the increase desire to have more milk to satisfy that hunger also increases. So by doing the cluster feeding, I mean, there's some times where you're just like, when do we stop? And it feels like you don't. But that's actually a really good sign because you're building up your milk supply. And then later on, you'll have less issues with that. But did I answer that question correctly?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Just cluster feeding is a big topic you
Yeah, we
about.
talk about that sometimes, just not, wanting to know if the baby's getting enough. That's the thing with having a bottle. You can look at a bottle and see how much is going in. You can't really do that when you're breastfeeding. So the best way to do it is to figure out what's going out.
Mm.
So the poo, that is how you kind of gauge it. So we talk a lot about that. We talk about cluster feeding, different positions, sometimes just how the baby's held. Sometimes, sideline nursing, being able to nurse laying down. Often co-sleeping comes up and is discussed, how you can do that safely, which the Sweet Sleep Safe book is really great for that. Trying to think. You often hear moms come in where their pediatricians are usually encouraging them to start formula. It's a very slippery slope because once other things start becoming introduced, the breastfeeding is all about supply and demand. So the more the baby is demanding, the higher the supply is. If the baby's supplementing with other things, the demand goes down, and very often the amount of milk that you're making goes down too. So having an opportunity to come and speak with other mothers about kind of what works for them, um, knowing that taking information sometimes with a grain of salt, from a medical community who often is older men as pediatricians that might not know as much about breastfeeding. Um, yeah, that happens sometimes. So
Yeah. Just kind of following your own intuition and,
definitely follow your own intuition. There's always this thing like, oh, don't hold your baby. You're going to spoil your baby. You can't spoil your baby. They've been there inside and now they're transitioning to the outside world and all they know is you. They don't know anything else. So being able to have them close, be able to help them with their needs. I mean, because honestly, breastfeeding often checks a lot of the boxes. You're close, you're snuggly, there's warmth, there's food. I mean, so many things.
co-regulation of just like
Yes,
face-to-face contact.
oxytocin.
Mhm. Yeah.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah. I think yeah, I mean, just having an opportunity, meetings are free of charge. There's no cost. You're welcome to become a member if you like. You can donate money to the group, and that usually stays in your local group for different activities and stuff that may happen. But otherwise, it's free to come and
Get support.
yeah, and sometimes it's just nice. I know I started going, it took me a really long time to go to meetings. I actually had learned about them before I was ever pregnant and then had looked into it briefly while I was pregnant, but then, life was crazy. And after about 3 months, after having my son, we finally started going to meetings. And I was like, why did it take me so long to come? Just because it was so much amazing information, a really awesome group of ladies, many who I'm very close with now, still, years past. And it's nice to feel supported, in this very womanly, beautiful thing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I like it.
Cool. Um, Alyssa, did you have any questions or anything? If not, that's totally fine.
I don't think so. I just, it's interesting. Definitely an organization that I never heard of. So I think there's definitely a push for more support in this area. After having my first son, um, I was fortunate enough to hire a doula who's also a lactation consultant. And when
Nice.
I was in the hospital, I think I met with four different lactation consultants, and our hospital also offers like a weekly support group. So I remember when I first got home, I got a call, and um, our pediatrician is female, and she's always asking, if how things are going. My OB is also female, so just making sure that, I have the support and knowing that it's there. They're always really, diligent to ask about those things and offer that support.
That's awesome.
But yeah, I would say like our experience has been going really well. The cluster feeding, like you said in the beginning, was a little bit of a shock. And their their growing pains, if you want to call it that, can be a little bit stressful for mom, because when they hit that initial growth spurt, it's like, I thought I just fed you, how much are you really getting? And it's true, I do worry about um how much is he getting, or is it enough? Because you don't really know unless you start pumping and then giving them bottles. I feel like that's the only way I've really been able to judge. Um, but
Definitely look at that output, how much output there is.
yeah, that's definitely a good point that you made. I would say his diapers, wet, and you know poo have been pretty good ever since he's come home.
Nice.
And certain times of the day, we know, like, oh, he just had a really good feed. There's going to be a couple diapers coming through
Yay.
this way, morning time especially. So yeah. um I don't think I have any questions, though. I mean, I'm going to be going back to work um in a couple of weeks, and so he'll be starting daycare. So, you know, the my doula suggested I try to pump at least 3 times a day to work on that freezer supply for his daycare. But really, honestly, like, I love nursing him, and it's really hard for me to fit in three times a day. I've really only been pumping twice a day. So I think nursing's super convenient. And also, like you said, my mom and my mother-in-law, they didn't nurse any of their kids. So I think it's definitely like a generational thing.
Yes.
Some of my friends and family who have also had kids around the same time as me haven't been so lucky with, getting baby to latch or just being comfortable. So um, I'm really just grateful and blessed that we've been having a lot of success.
Yay.
Um, I know he spits up a little bit more than usual at certain times too. And so I was told, like, kind of depends on your letdown on that side. And um, yeah, so I think some days are a little bit different than others, but as long as we like stick to our routine, we usually don't have any problems.
Nice. Yeah, sometimes you can maybe help with that by changing different positions that you're nursing in. I don't know if
Right.
you tried like a laid back nursing where the baby's kind of on top of you. That way they can actually kind of control the flow a little bit. That would be something that you could try. I think one of my absolute favorite fun facts about nursing is how that when the baby latches on the nipple, there's a certain amount of their saliva that gets backwashed, for lack of a better word, into the mom. And when that happens, the hormones of the mom start detecting what that baby needs and immediately start making it for
Hmm.
a lot of times if you're around somebody like maybe your husband went to work and he was around people that were sick, he comes home, kisses you, you start making antibodies, the baby starts doing things, and then it's like all of a sudden you're making all the good stuff to be able to
Fight off that.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, and you can't get that with other forms. So definitely good for you. I'm so excited for you.
Thanks. Oh yeah, actually I do kind of have a question. Something that came up after talking to my mom, obviously, but we're still doing like a he's waking up twice a night pretty much, or in the early morning hours. I think our schedule might change a little bit once I do start going back to work and he's in daycare, but like, I heard you say, obviously, we don't really start introducing other forms of nutrition until they can hold their head up and have a good, strong tongue action, talking a lot more.
Yay.
Um, and one of the questions that came up was like when to start them on cereal. Is there a good time of the day to like give them that extra nutrition so that maybe they will sleep better? Or is the nursing breastfeeding still like the best option? Because he does sleep really good, after we nurse and have that time together. So I don't really know.
Well, breast milk digests really, really easily. So, and it helps definitely, a lot with the gut health. Um, so a lot of times just it doesn't last, like if you go and you eat a whole bunch of pancakes, you're probably going to be full for a really long time. Completely different with your baby because the breast milk, digests so well. So you often have to have that beautiful biological norm where you're just nursing again. Um, I personally wouldn't necessarily introduce cereal right away. You said 4 months? Is that what you said? 3 months.
3. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I would just nursing is probably going to be your best bet. They often say food before one is just for fun. So, you know, later on, when he's a little bit older, he can sit up on his own. He has the good tongue thrust, because that's really a good protection. That way you don't have to worry about them choking because
Right.
they're able to manipulate in their mouth and get it out. So
Okay.
it's very important.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking that. Not really a lot of the things that I read don't really suggest starting food until, or, puree or anything like that until like maybe 6 months at the earliest. So,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah. Look into baby-led weaning. That's something that a lot of people really favor, where you just slowly start introducing them some of your foods. Um, Teeth can be helpful sometimes too. Usually around 6 months is when you start seeing those. Although sometimes before, sometimes after. But yeah, like little pieces. I mean, sometimes just, when he does get a little bit older, cutting up small little pieces, not too small, something to gnaw on. A good hack that somebody told me was celery is really good for them to gnaw on when they're teething. So that could be something, that you might try. I mean, I definitely encourage people to research and see what works for them. Trust your intuition for sure, because you're going to be the best for your baby above anybody else.
Thanks. That's helpful. I know my husband, he was feeling really bad in the first couple of weeks we were home because he's like, I literally can't do anything. But once we started getting on the bottle feeding, we do it that at least once a day.
Nice.
So they can have that bonding time. That's really important for him too. And he's also an occupational therapist. So, he's really interested in learning all these things.
Mm-hmm.
Semi, obviously. And yeah, so it's fun to be in this field and go through this experience so then I can, give back to others, I think is the most rewarding.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, maybe have encourage your husband if he wants to help feel with bonding, to help set up nursing stations around the house. Have a spot where you have maybe a book, a snack, some water, somewhere that's comfortable, maybe over here, maybe over there, maybe a few places. Make sure he cuts up your steak when you're eating and have him feed it to you. Those are always really good bonding things that can be helpful too.
Oh, I'll be sure to tell him.
Okay, well, was there anything else you wanted to tell us about the Leche League? I know you had some notes and stuff. Make sure we went over everything.
Yeah, I think so. We talked about the different meetings. We talked about kind of where it began. Yeah, the nice thing about the Leche League too is the fact that when all this stuff, the twilight sleeping and the formula, what moms really wanted to kind of have other ladies understand was it has a lot to do with your intuition. Something also important to help get a good bond for breastfeeding is actually childbirth. What you're doing, what you plan on doing. A lot of times, if it's a very medicated birth, there's sometimes issues and challenges with trying to nurse after. There's other things that can end up affecting it too. So just kind of being aware of those. Um, Definitely paying attention. We talked about the positioning of how the baby is held, you know, sometimes just that, you know, sometimes it works. And even like you were mentioning, sometimes with maybe a overactive letdown or whatever, that just by having a different position, that can be really beneficial too. And personally, for me, sideline nursing saved me because I was having so many problems and so many challenges. And once I learned that, it all of a sudden became way more manageable. And I was just like, oh, I didn't know that. So, so yeah. Yeah, I think that's the main thing, obviously too, something that's important is mom and baby, especially at this time. You guys should be together as much as possible. I know you're saying you have to get ready to go back to work here soon, but as soon as you're not at work, you're spending time with your baby. Because sometimes that impact can affect things. But if you have a good support system and you're able to offer as much as possible, I think you're going to be great.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I'm lucky too that my job is really pretty flexible. So I can go in late or kind
Oh,
of
perfect.
come home early or work from home and occasionally and things like that. And then, my doula also did say, as soon as you pick him up, like nurse him in the car before you even get
Yes,
establish
definitely.
that bond. He'll be missing you. So,
Mm-hmm.
and we have 3 dogs at home, so sometimes, if it's their dinner time and I'm nursing him, it's a little chaotic. So it's nice when we have that just alone time.
Yeah,
And I'll definitely take advantage of that. So
definitely.
yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks for popping on.
Yeah. Anytime. I'm always
You
interested in hearing new things and
definitely see if you can find a space or someone that's local in your area to go check out a meeting. Sometimes some meetings, they do usually happen more during the day, but sometimes you'll find night meetings. They do have weekend meetings on occasion. Some meetings you can even bring your husband to. That way it could be, educational for them because there's so much stuff that they don't know.
right.
So just being able to kind of see and I mean, if you think about it, how many of us really paid attention if there were other people that were nursing? I never really noticed that before. I do now, you
No,
know.
you think that a lot of those moms, want more privacy and things like that. And now that I'm in these shoes, I really don't care, I
Right,
want to tell people
exactly.
about my experience and how it feels and I don't mind doing it out in public. And I know that's definitely becoming more of a trend. So it's fun.
Have you used the double shirt method when you nurse?
No,
No.
I don't think I've ever heard.
If you have like a tank top or a nursing bra, you can have that on and then have like another shirt over. And then you can take this shirt and pull it up,
Oh yeah, okay.
pull that part down. That way you can't really see anything. So
Right.
that makes it really nice. And if somebody is more modest, you can do that, but that way you're not necessarily exposing yourself.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so it's something, and a lot of times people don't even know. I've had people, they're like, oh, the baby. I'm like, he's nursing. Oh, I'm sorry. And it's like, you're fine. So it's kind of fun to do sometimes.
That's a good tip. Thanks.
Definitely.
All right. Well, we will talk to you later.
Thanks, Car.
Thanks.